Hello, my lovely friends, and welcome to the first Rising with Love podcast. I'm so excited to have you here and so thrilled to basically make this podcast. I've been talking about this in such a long time and I have so many ideas for it and I can't wait to share them all. But for now, I just really feel like this is a moment where I'm again allowing myself to leave my comfort zone. And I feel like especially the theme that I had last year was embracing my weakness and making vulnerability my strength. And I do still feel like this is a theme which until this moment now I'm still integrating more and more in my life. And I as well have a feeling like this is something which never really is going to stop, but it is like a lifetime theme. And something which I invite you to, to always leave your comfort zone and to drive for growth and to drive for expanding your horizon. So I'm super exciting and super nervous to start this journey with you today. And for today, I simply wanted to invite you to, I simply wanted to flow with you of the reasons why I'm starting this podcast. Basically, and what this podcast is going to be about, because I've decided to make this podcast because I, in my entire life, have made a lot of experiences, like a lot. And there's so much knowledge that I gained from my experiences, which I would love to share with the outside world. And I do believe that to some extent it really would be a disservice if I wouldn't be sharing what I have been going through, because I can see that there is a lot of potential and a lot of learning that I can offer you and that I can give you. So hopefully you don't need to make the same mistakes or the same experience as I have. Or maybe you have a chance to simply deal with things in a smoother way and do not need to go through a lot of pain and a lot of suffering like I had in my life. Because I have my phone here just to check out what I want to talk with you about, because I feel like I'm just going in a bit of a flowy stage. So I'm really trying to embrace my feminine here and simply let everything express itself as it wants to be expressed through me. But in the same time, I'm trying to have a tiny bit of structure, so we're not going in the endless ocean of nothingness. Just to keep that clear. So this podcast actually is made for sensitive souls, for souls who have the feeling like they're allowed to face a lot of challenges too in their life. Maybe people who are not really find themselves identified with the way how the world is going currently, with the matrix, how I as well call it, that we're all living with this 9-to-5 life. And I remember like one of my friends has been asking me, she's like, Laura, but can you not imagine to like move back to your home city and buy a house there and like live in this neighborhood? And in my world I was just like, oh my gosh, this would be like my worst nightmare. Don't misunderstand me. I'm sure for some of you out there it's like your perfect life purpose and it suits your soul and your personality in the perfect manner. But for me it was just never that case. I've never fit in this system from the beginning onwards, which had to do with me having, like, I didn't get diagnosed with ADHD, but I was such an active and wild child that already in primary school, like, my mother had to take me to the psychiatrist and they basically wanted to give me Ritalin to calm me down as well, because I had a reading and a spelling disorder or a problem, so I wasn't the best in it. I wrote words quite terribly, yeah. So, yes, for me it was always really, really difficult to fit in the system because I wasn't like all the other children, and I feel like nobody is like everyone because we're all so unique in our expression and we're all so beautiful. But for me it was just like I always was too good for the good, too bad for the bad, for the good. No, wait. It's so difficult to explain. I'm trying to find my words for it. But like for that, I would need to go into how the German school system is structured, and it's just really fucked in a way. So basically we have like in primary school, we have like 4 different schools which you can enter afterwards. I'm making this real quick, and I know it's super complicated. And there are like 2 schools which I say they're good, like they're like society sees them as like, okay, those people are gonna make their lives and they're gonna be fine, they're gonna be sweet. And they're like this 2 schools who basically they kind of give you the feeling like you're fucking up your entire life if you come to the other 2 schools. Like you can't be saved anymore, your life is just gonna be destroyed, you're never gonna make it, or you're never gonna become something afterwards, which is so fun because what should you become anyways? And I always was too bad to come to those 2 good schools, but I was too good to be on the 2 bad schools. So in a way, I really never had a place in the system. And as well, because I was just behaving completely different. And it was so weird. I remember being in primary school. It was just really weird. Although I did really enjoy my class and I liked my class already back then, I questioned so many things. And as well, because my mother decided against the Ritalin pills and against giving me medication, it became such an intense journey that we were having with each other. Because in my family history, basically, especially in my mother's family history, like they were so achievement orientated that it was absolutely crazy. And if you didn't have a good grade, and with good grade, I'm talking about a 1 or a 2, because in Germany we have the system that 1 is like really, really good and a 6 is like the worst that you can get. And if you have a 6, you basically fail your entire life, more or less. In my family, if you didn't have a 1 or a 2, which means like a really good or a good, then you already were like dumb as shit. So imagine me being in that family system of, well, basically I always had like 3s or 4s. Like that was like the range where I was like moving in primary school. So basically for my grandparents and for my mother, I was dumb. Like I really was dumb. They even said that to me like quite often. And I love my family a lot, but in our family history, there's like a lot of abuse. A lot of abuse. A lot of abuse. And they don't do that on purpose. Like this is something which I find so important to understand, because I can see that in society happening so much that people are blaming their parents for what they have become. But I feel like it is always so important to understand that everything that our parents or our grandparents or their grands putting on top of us has been put on top of them first. So they had to go through all that suffering, and they had been conditioned to think in that way. They had been conditioned to think that if you do not write a good or a very good, like a 1 or a 2, then you're basically stupid. So that's what they've been told to do, and told to believe. So it's not their fault that they are saying that as well, because they just simply didn't have the awareness of what that actually can cause within a child. Like they may have the knowing that it's hurted them, but in the same time, you know how it is if you're like starting to react emotionally to something because you're triggered, because your ego feels attacked. That's what I'm always referring to as the ego. The ego is the identification with the thought and with the feeling and with the emotions. But we're going to dive more into that in future podcast episodes. But just for now, when the ego is feeling attacked. And of course, as a parent, you want your child to be good in school. First of all, because there are like all the worries that you're having, that if your child isn't good, then, he might not gonna make its way in this world, or it might not gonna make its way through this world, or it might not find a job, or it might not find a position. So there is this scarcity which is around. But then on the other side, there's your ego too. Just like, what are the other parents are saying about me? Like, what does that say about myself? If my child isn't good in school, then that means that I'm not a good parent, and so on and so on. And if you then do not have the maturity, or you never learned on how to deal with your emotion, it's so easy to simply place that on top of your child. And that was basically what happened in my family from generation to generation to generation. So basically from the first grade onwards, I got programmed that I'm stupid and that I'm not good enough, and that I am a failure, and that regardless of what I'm doing, I'm basically not fitting into the system. And this is really important to understand, because that is what I've learned. And basically I believe that. I truly, truly, truly believe that, because I've heard it every single day, or like almost every day, that I'm stupid and that I don't get my shit together and that I'm not good enough. And I really did believe that. I believe that in so many areas of my life, and it was just so interesting for me to observe on how that was unfolding during my entire school life, during my entire teenage years, until the point where I am right now. So when it came to the point on primary school ended and you were starting to come to a higher school, I didn't make it to the two good schools in Germany, because we had like the system, which I don't know if I explained it or not, where there are like two good schools in Germany and like two bad schools in Germany. And basically I made it to one of the bad ones, which kind of already gives you that feeling, like in Germany, in the education system, gives you the feeling of, you're never going to make it in your life. Those were kind of the schools where you afterwards would get jobs like, I don't know, working as a mechanic or working as a cashier or working as a cashier, just to give you an idea of that. So they were kind of telling you that if you are in that two lower schools, you do not have the possibility to get a secretary or to work for a travel agent or to do any of those kind of jobs. Just to put it a tiny bit more in perspective, I feel like it is really hard for myself to explain that, because like the German school system, out of my perspective, is really complicated for someone who has not been raised and born in Germany. And only if you go to the very, very good school, the highest school of all, you could go to university. Anyways, coming back to the point. So I made it to one of the bad schools where you kind of get the feeling like you don't have any future at all, or at least I got that. It was a really, really hard time. And during that time period, I remember that my family was really absent to myself. Like they wouldn't talk to me for a while and kind of as well said like they would never step in that school or anything. And thankfully though, my mother, like, as hard as we had it with each other, like I love her so dearly because there was so much awareness behind her, and she already had so much knowledge as well, because back in the days, internet basically just came out, so they just didn't had the opportunities that we have nowadays by going on Google and researching things. They just started to have that. Let me correct that. So basically what my mom did is she put me away from that school and sent me to a private school, which was a Montessori school. And that was basically the most life-saving decision that she could have done for myself, because then there I was, an outcast being surrounded by outcasts. And I finally felt like I belong. I finally felt like I found a tribe and a family or classmates who truly understood what I was going through, because we kind of all had the same issues in some way or the other. Like we just didn't fit in the system. Like the system wasn't made for us either, because we had problems with spelling or writing or reading or whatever. But as well, the Montessori school system is just a really amazing place back in the days, for us, out of my perspective, to teach people to be independent and to learn solution orientated. So for me, it was the perfect school. It was so life-saving. It changed my entire life and my entire being as well, because there was no grades anymore, so I couldn't do bad in school anymore, thankfully. But still, obviously, the characteristic didn't change. So there was still a lot of abuse present within my family, which mostly was emotional, but as well psychological. And sometimes it came to physical abuse, but it was in a frame where I would say, like, I feel like people can experience worse than what I experienced. And also there, I don't want to blame anyone, because it did hurt back in the days, but I'm really grateful for everything that I experienced, because it made me the person that I am today, and it basically let my consciousness arise, and it let me wake up to the system and let me make this decision of like, no, I'm never going to do this again. And it brought me to becoming a mindfulness coach and going on this journey, because basically what happened then was that through everything that I experienced, I started to really have depressions, and I started to really be depressed, coming from that belief system that I'm worthless, that I'm stupid, and that I don't belong, and having all those thoughts in mind. So by the age of 13, 14, I realized that there's something not quite right with me, in a way of how I felt about myself, in a way of how I was expressing myself. Like, puberty was coming, in puberty anyways, the brain starts to restructure itself. So people who are teenagers just do not think normally anymore, because they basically really can't, and I could not, and I couldn't deal with my emotions, because my pain body and was so big that I couldn't handle it anymore. And back in that days, I really started to self-harm myself. So what I would do was, like, either I would cut myself, or I would smash my head against walls, or I would smash my head against doorways, because I just really didn't knew how to deal with my emotions, and because my parents didn't really work through their emotions or their pain, they weren't really emotional available for me. So I basically always had that feeling of not being loved, or not being good enough, or not being welcome, or not being wanted as well, because that was everything that I've perceived from my parents, or especially from my mother. My dad was just not always available because he was always at work, and that would make my mom even more frustrated, and then I was the only one at home, so I always got her anger and her frustration placed on top of me. And there are so many pages of my diary where I'm just writing that I'm so sad, that I could cry the entire day, that I'm not loved, that nobody loves me. And that was like my mantra, that really became my mantra. And so I started to really jump into a lot of relationships already in the early age, from the age of 13 to 14, because that was the way on how I coped my not being worthy situation, through finding boyfriends who then make me feel loved. So I really were looking for love on the outside. And of course, as a teenager, you don't really understand that is something that you can provide to yourself, no? So back in the days, I did that. And then I broke up with my second boyfriend, which as well was my first time. And oh my gosh, like, it was my fault, and I made so many mistakes during that time, because I literally didn't know how to deal anything. I was an absolute disaster, an absolute emotional disaster. Really, back in the days, already cheated on my partner. Like, just to make that clear, like, I was fucking 14 years old. I as well didn't have any clue of what I was doing there, but like, it was absolutely catastrophic. Like, I was a terrible, terrible person back in that days. And when we broke up, I basically had a complete nervous breakdown. Like, I was sitting in in the corner of my room. I was holding myself like an embryo, like having my feet up rolled to my chest, my arms around, and I was basically just like rolling back and forth the entire day. For like hours. I was screaming, I was crying, I was like calling him, I was calling his mother, I was calling the police back in the days, and telling them to come and please take me away from my home. Because my parents just didn't really knew how to deal with me, and I can't really blame them, to be completely honest, because like, I feel like if I would have not have the knowledge that I have right now, I probably would 100% would have not known how to deal with myself either, and I didn't back know in that days, of course, as well. So I was just like completely wrecked, and I was completely not stable. I was so unstable, and I was like hurting a lot of people in that days, during that time as well, and it would go up until the age of 17. So that's a really long journey that we're going here, my friends, and I'm trying to keep that as short as possible. There's a lot of drama in here. A lot of drama. But that happened. And so I thankfully had my best friend, and I had her mother, which started to really take a lot of care of me. And I started to sleep at their place basically almost every day. And I loved my second mother. I always call her my second mother because back in that days, she really started to hold the emotions that my mother wasn't able to hold in that moment, like my emotions. Not because she didn't want it to, but just simply because she couldn't. Because there was still a lot of pain from her past, which I feel like not going into too much. But as I said, abuse has been part of my family for generations. Like it already started with my grandpa, that my great-grandmother told my grandpa that she would love to throw him out of the window because she doesn't want to have him. And just things like that to get you like a tiny bit of an understanding of what kind of abuse I am talking about. So I had my second mother, and we had like really long conversation always. And I remember that she was telling me basically like if I would not let anyone look at what I'm going through, that I would do the same to my children. And I feel like that was like a knock in my head, which I was like, no, this is not going to happen. I'm not going to do the same shit to my children. I don't want my children to suffer as much as I do. Like this is stopping and this is ending with me. So I basically then went to school and I went to the doctor that day. I took myself to the doctor to tell the doctor that I'm depressed and that I need some help. And I feel like 15 years back then. So like it's going a tiny bit around. Like I do not know particularly anymore in which age line I was because it's so long ago and it feels like it's decades. But if you ask me what I feel like it was like around the age of 15. Because when I was 16, I know for sure I was by the psychologist already. And with the age of 15, I went to the doctor and she basically subscribed me to a psychologist. So I went to a psychologist for a few years and that was like really nourishing for my soul. And it was something which I absolutely needed, and it helped me improve in so many multiple ways. Yes, so I wasn't a psychologist. I still had so many changing partners during that time, that I really started to establish kind of a slutty, how do you say that? People basically called me a slut, to say it straightforward, because I had so many changing partners. But for me, it was never about the sexual act itself. For me, it was always just about looking for love. And my second mother already said that to my dad as well one day. She was like, Laura is not looking for a boyfriend. Laura's looking for love. And I really was looking for love. So I had so many changing partners because I was always hoping to fill that hole that I was feeling inside of myself, to see that worth, to see that I am worthy, to see that I am loved, to see that I'm something special, basically. And I didn't fill that hole by myself until I was 22 to 20 years old. I think that was the time where everything changed for me, and I was like basically waking up and I was like, what's happening there? But already in that stage, I started to meditate, even though it was like not a lot, but it's just like I did a few meditations here, I did a few meditations there, because my mother as well was really religious. And she believed a lot in angels, and she still does. And there's an entire world to talk about angels, but I really feel like it is not my jam. Even though I do love them and I do believe that there are like frequencies or energies, however you want to call it, who are for sure somehow in this 3D reality, present in this 3D reality as energy transformations. That's what I like to call them. So that's the first meditation that I started, and then I left when I was 18, and I left to New Zealand, and I left because my mother made me go. And my mother said like it would be so good for me to go and to see something else, because she saw how many changing partners I had, and I feel she sensed that I was really not happy. It was a bit difficult because back in the days, people were not really thinking or believing that going to a psychologist would be necessary or would be something good. So even there, and my parents weren't really saying something against it, but they as well weren't really supportive that I was going to a psychologist, although they both went with me 2 times. And it helped as well, so it made things a tiny bit more easier. That was in the age of 16. Now I am again in my flowy feminine energy, jumping from back and forth and back. But during those years, really nothing special has happened, or nothing which I feel mentioned it, apart from the slut shaming. That was a big thing. That's where we stopped. Now I get it again. I have it. So yeah, there was a lot of slut shaming happening, and then I broke up with one of my ex-partners, and I went like this huge thing in my school. I was like so terrible, and people really called me a slut everywhere. Like sometimes they were even like throwing little paper balls behind me on the floors, and I was like, oh, you really don't get it now, don't you? Like they really, of course not, we're teenagers. Teenagers can be so hard with each other, and like what do you expect from a teenager, But that really hurt. It hurt on so many levels. And I remember that during there was like a time period where I really started to build like this protection shield around me, because people were starting to tell really fake news about me. I remember one day I was like in the hospital because I had some issues with my stomach, and I came back from it, and people were like coming to me and being like, oh, Laura, you would have not needed to basically, how is it called? Get rid of your child. I know they abort your child. And I was like, what the the fuck? Like, what are you talking about? Which fucking child? What the fuck? What's going on in your mind? And just stories like that. And there were like multiple more. And I feel like then it as well was like the invitation for some guys to be like, just simply telling people that I was having sex with them, but I didn't. And that went even better and better. So, it was just like, it was a terrible time. It was a really, really terrible disaster. There was like so much drama in my world, so much drama. And I had people writing me on Facebook, like telling me what a slut I am. And I was like, I don't fucking even know you. Do you know me? Do you know who I am? Do you know what's going on in my life? So no. So why are you texting me? I don't get that. But of course, by now, I do understand that they as well just had frustrations going on in their life, and they needed someone to let it out. So yeah, go to the one who's already in the victim role, because they're always the best one to put their shit on top. Isn't it like that? Not putting myself out there, because I wasn't different during that age. Coming back to the point, since that, of course, heard it like shit when everybody's saying that you're a slut, and it is basically just putting on top of that you're not worthy kind of topic that I was living during that time, I, of course, started to build like this protection shield around me. And then I really started to be like, girl, you know what? You want to have a slut? Well, let me show you how slutty I can be. And then not that I had sex with a lot of people, but then I became like this real dick. Like I became like such an ass to so many people. I had this protection shield around me, and I was like basically just looking, I became like a tiny bit narcissistic, because in the environment that I have been grown up, I became so sensitive, to people's emotions and to what would make people feel down. And then I was just like this fucking machine gun, you would say something against me and I was like, I would shoot back at you, but to a point where you're like in the floor and not talking to me anymore, because I'm done with you, I made you, I killed you basically. Never physically, but mostly really with my words. I became so sharp with my words. It's actually quite good, because it was not quite good, don't misunderstand me, but I learned so much out of that time, which is still really helpful for myself, because then I started to become really into NLP and into reading body language and into not being manipulated again. And then I became like the master manipulator, which was like, yeah. Now I know that this is a really helpful tool which you can use to actively help people to change their state of mind, to change what they're going through, and to influence someone on a better level. Because in the end, we never really not influencing each other. We are always influencing each other by just the way how we are sharing and what we're talking and what we're telling and how we're speaking, how we're articulating. Like, we are always influencing. There's not a way on not to influence someone else through your body, because subconsciously you always read body language, and you can use that really wisely if you're aware of that. Coming back to it. So I had this entire phase of becoming like this thick, and then, well, school ended and my mom wanted to send me to New Zealand, and as well sent me to New Zealand because she felt that I was like, well, she saw how much I was, because during that time then as well, I really started to rebel against her as well. I was like, no, I'm not taking this shit anymore. Like, I'm done with it. Like, it felt like during that time, I really found my inner fire, which was so necessary and so needed. As I told you in the beginning, like, we all have this darkness and this light inside of us. And I found like my darker parts, like, shadow work is so amazing. And I can't wait to talk with you more about that, because if you're using your shadow, like this fire inside of you consciously, it can be such an amazing tool. But back in the days, I really lived that out. So I came to New Zealand, and that was the moment where everything changed for me. It really did, because I was in New Zealand. It was 3 months that I was separated from my parents, 3 months that I was separated from that abuse, and where I was just with myself, where I was surrounded in a field which didn't knew my past history, which didn't knew that I was like a slut, or how they call it, like, a slut, like, yeah, or a whore, whatever they called me, but where I was just me, you know, whatever that me was in that version of the time. And I felt for the first time of my life, I really had the opportunity to just be who I really was, to be this present being, to be this gentle and kind and compassionate soul which was lying within me. And I felt so free. I felt so powerful and so calm and so peaceful. And that is when I understood that I was not happy at all before, and I was super depressed before, and that my life was a complete disaster before, and that I just don't want to live a life like that anymore. That was like, it was so clear in my mind, because I saw what is possible, and I saw how I could feel and how free I could be. And I went back to Germany, and then like, wow, I hit rock bottom. That was my rock bottom point. Like, honestly, like, after that, geez, I became so depressed as well, because that was the time when I realized more that my dad really had an alcohol issue, and when that topic started to become more present within our family. And I always said, back in the days when my mom and I had so many fights, and when I didn't receive the love that I needed, if I wouldn't have my dad, I would already have killed myself. And I meant that. I really meant that. In the younger years, if my dad would have not been there for me, even though he was only there for a few hours on the weekend, I would have not made it. Like, I'm 100% certain that I would not be here, because my dad at least gave me some kind of feeling of being real loved. Although my mom tried her best as well, and she had her moments. She really had her moments. Oh, and she's so beautiful. She made such a great transition now. But coming back to the point, where was I? So my dad, I figured out that he had a problem with alcohol, and then that just made my entire world smash. Like, everything broke down. Everything has fallen in its pieces. It was the worst realization for me. Together with being back in Germany, I felt so caged and so trapped. And my mother said, like, you can go, because I came back and I said, like, I'm gonna leave again. Like, this is it. Like, I'm not gonna stay here. I want to pack my bags. I want to go. And I want to leave. Like, I'm serious. I want to go. And she said, like, you can go once you made your apprenticeship, once you kind of saved your future. So I had to do that, and I did that. I made a training as an office clerk with focusing on event management back in the years. But I was so depressed, and that was, I started to go back to the psychologist again. And that was the time period as well where I did found Buddhism for myself. So because I had so much pain within me, I had a friend who was basically telling me that she was like going to the center to meditate, and she tried, like, I think she told me twice that I should come, and the second time she invited me, I was like, you know what, right now I go there. And I went there and I kind of never left it. It felt amazing. I read a book which was called Don't Worry, Be Grumpy. And this book was life-changing. It was like this book about many Buddhist short stories, and that was the way of how I found my path more and more to mindfulness, you know. And I started to really meditate actively every single day. Or not every single day, but like twice a week. And that was like when I was around, 18, 19. So it was a fun time too. Maybe it was more 19 than 18. Anyways. But my depression hit me really hard, and I hit rock bottom, and it was on a point where like everything was so grayish and my world lost all its colors. Like I didn't felt anything anymore. It was so weird. I felt like I was like basically just an observer of a movie, but I wasn't playing in that movie anymore. And that basically was my life, and it was for that every day. And I remember myself driving my car and having thoughts like it would be so easy to just hit that wall. But then when I had that thought, I as well thought about everybody in my family, and I was like, they would not be able to come clear with that. So I just couldn't. And so again, I went to the psychologist, and then I went to the psychiatrist, because my psychologist started to get worried about me too, because I wasn't able to sleep anymore, and I was lying awake for hours at night. I remember that I had a feeling of like there was constantly electricity going through my body, and I just couldn't go to sleep anymore. And I had those huge negative self-talk, and I started to become aware of that self-talk in that time period where I was like constantly making myself down. And then basically I got antidepressant pills, and it was said like, yeah, we're gonna, make a plan for you on how you can leave the pills again. But I was 19 years old, so nobody really took care of me in that sense, and nobody ever talked with me of how I can get rid of the pills. But it was just like, you're gonna take that, and never kind of ask about it again. And that's how it felt. So after 2 months, I had a checkup with the doctor again. He's like, oh, so how do you feel on the pills? So I was like, well, I'm feeling that. And she's like, do you have any side effects? Like, not that they ever told me the side effects or so. So I was like, no. And she's like, yeah, okay, that's fine. After a year, I realized I had side effects, but I just didn't notice that I had them, because basically during that time period where I took antidepressants, everything was just like, I didn't care about anything anymore. Like, I wasn't really sad because of the antidepressant. I couldn't get really sad, but I wasn't really happy either. So I was just like this kind of a machine that was going on around. And I again cheated a lot on my ex-partner during that time period. And then I said to my best friend, I know I should feel bad about it, but I don't. Like, it just doesn't feel wrong in my body. Like, honestly, consciously, I am aware mentally that I should feel bad about this, but I just don't feel it. And it came to a point where my friends were actually saying to me, like, Laura, if you continue to be like that, like, we don't think that we can be friends with you anymore. And I was like, well, fuck, this shit is real. So I came in a relationship where I felt really safe and really seen. And to this day, I am so grateful for this relationship, because it was my savior during that time period, because I felt so safe and so established, and my ex-partner was really wise. He was so conscious, and he taught me a lot. I decided myself to get off my medication and to therapy myself, basically. And so I did that. Everything went well. Everything went amazingly. Until 6 months were passed, because then basically my hormones started to be in a real normal level again, and I didn't have any medication in my system anymore. Everything was back in balance. And fuck shit, like, if you don't know how emotions feel for an entire year, the moment you feel them again, it's just like, what the fuck is this, and how do I deal with that? It came back to me onto the point that I've never dealt with my emotions before, and now I all of a sudden had this like bunch of emotions that I haven't felt in a year, and I was like, what the fuck is this? Do all people always feel like that? How do they survive? Like, you can't live with that. So yeah, I went to Australia and I started my teacher training as a yoga teacher. And that basically was the path where I started my mindfulness journey, and where I started to be like, you know what? I am not going to go back on pills again. I'm not going to do it again. I'm going to stay sober. And I'm not going to go back to the psychologist or the psychiatrist. Like, don't see how this is serving me, because the only thing which actively really helped me to stay calm and present and peaceful within myself is meditation. So, you know what? I'm going to find a natural way of healing myself, and then I'm going to share this way with everyone. And I was 22 during that time period. So I already meditated for many years. I did yoga more actively since I was 19, and that became my teacher. That became my practice in every day to heal myself from depression and to teach myself on how can I deal naturally with my emotions and how can I overcome that trauma that is within myself. And it is present until that day. Like, I'm still observing so many emotions out of that time, of course, because there's so much conditioning happening in me, or still is present within me. But compared to what I had been going through to what I'm experiencing now, like, I feel like I'm in heaven. Like, I created this really safe environment for myself where I'm giving myself the allowance to be who I am. And it was an entire journey of realizing who I'm not, to understand who I am and who I want to be. And now I have the chance to actively choose that and to actively go for that. And that as well all basically has happened that, I just told you about the ex-partner who was super wise and who I really appreciated. Like, he separated from me in a really bad way, but that's a different story. But this separation made me wake up. It really made me wake up in a sense of understanding that I am responsible for my emotions, and that I cannot blame anyone else for what I'm going through. If I want to change my life, then I have to own up to my own shit, and I have to take what I can and turn the best out of it, because we're all going through our stuff and we all have tough and hard times. But we're the creator of that. And it was like this book of Eckhart Tolle, which I read, which is called A New Earth, and I can highly recommend that to anyone who would love to go more in depth in their own spiritual journey, or who would love to have a better understanding. This book, it changed my life. It really changed my life, and it made me wake up to the illusion that I was living in before. It made me wake up to this mental image that I was creating about myself of, this is Laura, this is what Laura is wearing, this is what Laura is doing, and made me really understand that this is changing in every single second, in every single moment. I am someone else. I am someone new, and I can change to what I want to. I can manifest the future that I desire. And in the end, the room for all possibilities and for everything is open for me. Yeah. And if I believe in it, I can do it. And I did in multiple other levels. And now it's a new chapter in my life and a new way that I'm working through. But for now, I do actually feel like this is everything which I have to say today. This is the reason why I'm sitting here today, why I am doing what I am doing. Of course, there were like years now of healing in between that. And basically with 22 was when I started to take on that healing journey, and I went through a lot, and I got so many exercises, so many to-dos, but it's not over yet. And I'm so excited to take you with me on this journey and to share with you even more and to grow with you and to learn with you, because I feel like this is all what I want now, that I have been so disconnected with myself for so many years, so disconnected from society and putting so much hate out there. And now I just really feel like I want to share love. I really want to share love. And there's like this beautiful exercise, which is called the 7 Deep Dive, and it's from Dean Graziosi. And I learned that one when I started my entrepreneur journey. It was like the real reason why, like, why do I want to do it? Like, why do I want to start this business? What is the real reason? And when I did this exercise, for me, what I found is the real reason why I want to do it is because I want to give and experience real love, like real unconditional love. And that not just for myself, but for everyone that is crossing my path, for everyone that is surrounding myself. Because I never had that. My entire life, I was trapped in conditional love, that I always try to do something to feel love. And now I know that love is always accessible and love is always present, even in a moment where we feel like we're lost and we're disconnected, but it all is following a higher purpose. And all I want to do is just experience that. I want to experience unconditional love towards myself, and with that share unconditional love with everyone that is crossing my path. Well, I hope you enjoyed that little journey in my childhood and that little journey around. I'm sure we're gonna go more in depth about that in other topics. I'm super excited to talk with you about, well, all the topics that I've already written down on my list here. This is gonna be a great and amazing time. And if you liked what you heard, or you're curious into hearing more about it, please don't forget to subscribe to this channel. And for now, I just feel like, end this podcast with just a 5 minutes quick meditation. So if you have the time, find yourself in a comfortable position and simply close your eyes. Just take a deep breath into your stomach. And let it go. Let's make this real juicy. Allow yourself to just sit here for maybe, let's say, 2 minutes and just focus on your breathing. Find that connection to yourself. Focus on the inhale and feel how the air is filling your entire being. Focus the exhalation, leaving it all behind, all the stress, all the worries, just you connected to your center, connected with yourself. And now, can you feel your toes without peeking? Can you just sense inside of your very own being, inside of your very own energy? Feel your body, the aliveness of your body that is always present within yourself. Can you sense that? Can you feel in that? Maybe you can expand that and go from your little toe to your entire foot. Maybe you can sense that in both of your feet, the left and the right. And expand that too in your legs. If you shift your attention to your fingers, how does that feel for you? Without peeking, do you know that your pinky finger is there? How is that feeling inside of your body? Your hands, your arms, your chest, your stomach, your back up to your throat, your entire head up to your third eye, your crown chakra. Can you just sit there bathing in your own aliveness, the aliveness of your body, your being, and give yourself some appreciation for being alive and for being here. Thank you so much, love, for listening. Thank you so much for being here. I wish you the most beautiful day. I hope I see you soon. All the love, all the light.